Okay, thank you and welcome to a slightly delayed meeting. We're just checking on Covacy, and we are Covas. We have 5 of our 9 committee members here today. So welcome to those and welcome to everyone online as well. We have a busy agenda today, so let me just do some preambles before we start. Please note that today's meeting will be recorded. The recording may be broadcast on the authority's internet and may be used for training purposes. All attendees will be in view of camera, and by attending you are consenting to being filmed, and the possible use of those images and sound recording may be used as outlined above. Some very specific things about online meetings. Please stay on mute when you're unless you wish to speak, and please keep your cameras on, as the legislation says everyone in attendance must be able to see and be seen. If you have any questions, please first your virtual hands, and for those in the room, I guess you can just wave your physical hands as well, and hopefully I'll spot you and invite you in. With that, I think we'll start with the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is item 1, which is apologies for absence. Microphone. Thank you. And there's one other I need to notify the committee of, is one of our lay members, Robert Williams, has tendered his resignation, and we therefore will be starting a search for another lay member in due course. So our best wishes to him for the work he's done to this committee in the past when he was the sole lay member back before the last election. Item 2, declaration of interest. Members reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 92, relating to the Council Tax, the Local Government Act of 2000, the Council Constitution and Members Code of Conduct. Are there any declarations anyone wishes to make relevant to today's proceedings? I look around the room and Verge, and I say no, so that's good. No, that's excellent news. We'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which are provided for information. As I said, they are there for information. We wanted to note that the intention was to add an action log to this, and Mark Thomas has worked hard on developing an action log. Unfortunately, he's not with us today, but Mark, if you can quickly give us a brief update on where we are with the action log.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you mentioned, we've developed an action log. It's currently got 6 items on there. First one, develop an action log for the committee, so that's been done. Second item is to have the progress in implementing external audit recommendations to be on the committee forward work programme. So that's scheduled to come to the November meeting. Progress in implementing internal audit recommendations be included in the work plan. That's on today's agenda, so that will have been done as well. Review the forward work programme against the committee terms of reference to ensure all items are covered. We've done that informally. We're pretty happy that it covers the forward work programme, but we just need to dot the I's and cross the T's to make sure that is 100% correct. Ensure that counter fraud is included as an agenda item for an appropriate future meeting. That's on the forward work programme for January. And the last item on there currently is develop a Governance and Audit Committee member training programme to include the Local Government Elections Act, but to develop a programme anyway. So that's still there. Perhaps it's a reminder really for some of the members to return their questionnaire. Lisa Compson issued a reminder last week, but if I could ask those who haven't returned the questionnaire to return them to Lisa, so we can help develop that forward work, the training programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. That's really, really helpful. We are going to shuffle the agenda around a little bit now because, as I should have said at the beginning of the meeting, apologies, we have in attendance today Chief Executive Ellis Cooper and his entire senior management team. So welcome to everyone. And they're all here because of agenda item 6, which is the draft self-assessment report. And I think Andrew Barry's going to introduce it, and then we'll hear from Andrew Mogford. And I think they're all here because that questions could go in any direction, I think. So with that, Andrew, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief because of the magnitude of the report, and there's a lot to get through. Other than to say it's first year, it's a huge piece of work. I think there are lessons to be learned in terms of perhaps how we approach this in the future rather than have this mega report once a year. But it's, will prove to be one of the central pillars of our governance. Very important report, retrospective albeit. And at that juncture, Chair, I'll just pass over to Andrew Mogford to take us through the report, if that's okay.
Thank you, Andrew. After Andrew too.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you. Okay, so what I thought I would do is just summarise really some of the key parts of the report. First being the legislation, then our approach, what the self-assessment report contains, and then our next steps really. So in terms of the legislation, you may or may not be aware that the annual performance report that we used to produce, for example, last year, has now been taken over by this self-assessment report. And the self-assessment report is in place to meet our duties under the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, Part 6 in particular. And one of the key aspects of our reporting is to question and challenge the performance requirements of the local authority. And that's done through three areas. The first, in terms of how we are exercising our functions effectively. Secondly, how we are using our resources, particularly economically, effectively and efficiently. And finally then, whether our governance is effective enough to secure those 2 points that I raised. So that, in essence, is a key element of our report. Another aspect is to consider not just the data, but also engagement on performance held with our 4 statutory consultees now, which are the council staff, local people, local businesses, and our trade unions, all of which have been summarised within the report, which you'll see within the pack. In addition to the Local Government and Elections Act, the report also meets our duties under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, where we are not only looking at how we are contributing to the 7 national goals, but also the 5 ways of working, and indeed how we are delivering our 4 local wellbeing objectives. So the approach we took was to look at our governance framework, which I think I presented a few times now to this committee and our scrutiny, where we're looking at embedding the 5 ways of working under the Act, but also looking at key elements of our own governance. For example, how we report, whether that be in open, transparent, effective accountability, looking at our sustainable economic, social, environmental and cultural benefits, also looking at how we use risk in our judgments, how we, for example, embed performance measures and controls across the organisation as well as finance, and also making sure that we are delivering and optimising achievements against our outcomes, against our key documents, for example, our corporate plan and our core values and operating model as a local authority. So within that, we focused on something which we approved at Council, our performance management and quality assurance framework, where we looked at plan, do, review, improve, and embedding that cycle throughout our governance to ensure continuous performance. So as part of the report, we've included elements of member scrutiny. We'll also include, Chair, today any feedback from this committee in taking before taking the report to Council for approval. We've also included any officer scrutiny through our quarterly performance and improvement reviews, elements of budget, commercial, board input, consultation and engagement, risk management, organisation development and capacity, and also some of our core models, as I mentioned earlier, for example, our core values and our operating model. We've also included within the report some case studies and taken on board particularly some of the comments from our scrutiny. I believe it was through you as Vice Chair, Councillor Gibbs, around not only looking at some of our positive case studies, but also where things perhaps haven't worked so well, and including those next year. And we've tried to do that in the time period for this year, where we have looked at some of those elements. But obviously next year we look at that in a little bit more detail. so that we're not just looking at best practice, but we're also looking and learning lessons as we go. As Councillor Barry alluded to earlier, perhaps next year we can have some workshops leading up to this particular committee, so that we don't have a massive document put in front of us, and there'll be opportunities for us to ask questions to gain a better understanding of the report. But as again, Councillor Barry said, this is our first time, and we're learning lessons as we go, and we can look to improve the process for next year. So when we were considering our performance and coming to our conclusions, we looked at some qualitative and quantitative elements of that. We looked at what our consultees said, what's coming back through those case studies, what's coming back through our self-evaluation process, which I'm sure some members will be aware of, that have fed into the work we've been doing with our scrutiny committees as well. And then at the end of the report, we've put together an action plan. Maybe there's a chance for us to look at that in a little bit more detail before that gets approved, for example, prioritisation or something along those lines. And finally, around perhaps the report itself, something that I've spoke about with the team as part of our reflection on doing this for the first time. Maybe those case studies can be published as a booklet and put on our website and then referred to. And we're also working on a summary version of the report, which will be far more user-friendly for getting those key messages out. And we hope to have that ready to publish around the same time as this report will, hopefully be approved at council. So in terms of next steps, we plan to take this following the committee today, work on any feedback, to provide that to council for approval in November, build our action plan into our existing governance frameworks and make sure that we monitor that and are able to provide quarterly feedback to relevant boards as required, and give an assessment of the delivery of that action plan next year in our self-assessment report. So with that in mind, Chair, I'll open up for questions if that's okay.
Thank you, Andrew. A really helpful summary of what's happened up till now and the roles and responsibilities of this committee. Before I sort of throw it open to the committee for questions, of which I guess there could be millions, but let's try and keep it to the governance and audit committee's role in this. My question is around, there's an awful lot of information in here, and it's really, really helpful as a layperson to understand and get underneath the skin of the organisation. Hopefully that helps the public as well to be able to do that. In all of the individual case studies and areas of business that are listed in the appendices, there's quite a number of key challenges identified which are flagged in red, and there's gaps or opportunities of improvement were also flagged. And I haven't added them up, but if I did add them up, I suspect there's dozens and dozens there. How do we manage these in terms of the organisation, obviously, as well as this list of issues has plenty of other lists of issues as well. How do we prioritise these? How do we put them into some sort of overall action plan? And how do we identify whether these key challenges have been addressed or not going forward?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are quite a few challenges across the report. The one thing I will say is part of the work we've been doing following and part of the work with the improvement board was looking at our governance. So within the organisation, each particular directorate has a business improvement plan, and a lot of the information, if not all, contained within this report has already been through that process of self-evaluation and business improvement plans, which will be captured there. In addition to that, the action plan, which is at the end, is like the high level summary of those actions, is planned that becomes part of our RTI board, the improvement aspect of our RTI board going forward, so that overarching governance can be placed on the organisation, as well as building it then into our scrutiny forward plans, and obviously bringing it back to this committee as you see fit with the committee chair.
Thank you, Andrea. That's helpful. Just since you mentioned RTI board, just to help me understand again, this might be common parlance in the organisation for those who aren't so familiar. Can you just talk a little bit about the RTI board, who sits on it, where it reports to, and where it sits in the new phrase I've learned today, governance architecture?
Okay, so our RTI board has been put in place to replace the improvement and assurance board. which was in place to help us with our key challenges and support the delivery of our RTI plan. So the board itself is chaired by the leader, with our chief executive as the vice chair. It includes all of our corporate management team and our cabinet, as well as the leader of the opposition and the deputy leader of the opposition. We invite our regulators on a 6-monthly basis, which is set out in our recently approved terms of reference, Chair, and I can share the terms of reference with yourself and the committee if you so wish.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand, and that I think that gives me confidence that this is being taken seriously by having a board of that standing looking at these things. So thank you for that. I'm looking around for any questions. I mean, we're not going to go through this page by page, but if there's any questions that individuals have regarding the documents, and if not, I'll continue on my list then. This guy going down from the very big scale to the very specific. On page 99 of the paper, good grief, it's a big old paper. There's a section there which talks about the staff survey. I just wonder that the staff survey says the staff survey got responses from 285 members of staff. Now, I think the total number of staff is somewhere in the region of 1,400. And I just wondered whether you think that sample is reasonable enough to really draw conclusions, or is the fact that over 1,000 people decided not to do the survey is of concern?
Mind if I come in to start with, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
No, I unfortunately it's not a figure we would deem as acceptable. That was what it was to start with, unfortunately. So we've been doing a lot of work in terms of how we approach engagement within the organisation. It's probably proved that both Kerry and Hannah come in a moment, but we've tried to reset under original RTI plan. It's really difficult to, when you're behind me. Sorry, Chair. We've tried to reset the way we engage with our staff base under our healthy organisation programme. So there's a raft of initiatives we've been trying to follow within that. From me personally going to every induction meeting we have with new staff. We've actually put on our first ever induction with new head teachers. So we've tried to reset the engagement with schools by that. So our entire corporate manager, or the directors, myself and a couple of other from CMT met with the head teachers to try and get them inducted right from the get-go. Myself and Alan, the deputy chief exec, we've been out and about to visit frontline services. So as well as obviously the standard things in terms of bringing back up our staff forum, reconstituting the staff forum and engaging with staff that way. So we've tried to work on that, understanding that obviously that poor response, if it is a poor response given the staff base, we need to try and engage with our staff base and try and understand, well, how do we give them that staff voice so we can actually listen to what they say and actually work and plan accordingly. So it's probably, before I waffle on, Chair, it's probably useful if I bring Hannah and Kerry in, who've been leading on that engagement work.
Ellie first, then Hannah.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Kerry it is. Just to let you know that with regards to the staff engagement, I think one of the things that we need to work on is making sure that our staff feel that their views are being listened to and they feel they're part of the decision-making process. So as what Ellis alluded to, we've looked at various forums now where we can do that and listen to our staff voice. As Ellis said, through our staff forum, managers network, HR meetings, and just basically getting staff to work with us and feel like they're part of the journey of our transformation of the organisation. I don't know if Hannah wants to add anything more to that.
Thank you, and apologies for getting me your name wrong.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate that really, but I think, you know, we definitely are going to take some lessons learned from the 285 responses, because I think since we've started that journey on engagement this year, we've asked in our staff forum and managers network about the lack of engagement. And I think, you know, the ability to go and meet staff rather than maybe just hand out paper copies or online copies, in terms of being face to face with them and asking them these questions is probably a better way of getting feedback, certainly from our frontline areas as well. Ellis mentioned the corporate inductions that we've been running. We've actually done that face to face for our frontline service as well, and we seem to get a lot more engagement from that. So we'll continue to learn those lessons and take that forward for the next staff survey.
Thank you, Hannah. And I guess that face-to-face stuff is going to get a little bit easier as things, like we're almost all in the room together here. So that might make it a little bit easier. Before I go on any further, I can see that Councillor Gibbs was going to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And that has preempted my question. I was going to ask with the likes of the frontline workers, like the litter pickers and whatnot, if obviously they haven't got access to computers, I shouldn't imagine. So I was going to ask the question: how are we engaging with the frontline staff? But Hannah has answered my question, Chair, when she said they're actually doing face-to-face meetings. And I take it, Hannah, the face-to-face meetings is taking place with all members of staff when appropriate.
Yeah, again, obviously doing that with all staff is a challenge. But you know, they do get those invitations to attend, and we just have to work on trying to get the best representation as possible. But I think, you know, it's also us trying to go out and visit those areas as well, when we want those pieces of engagement to get the best feedback we possibly can.
Lovely. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbs. On the same topic, but switching from staff to the public, if I turn to the list of questions that have been posed to the public, page 127 of 185 I'm on. Question 6 says, overall, how involved do you feel in how Merthyrdville delivers its services? And the sections are 3 and 4, not very involved and not involved at all, add up to something like 2/3 of the total population. And the other thing to note is that this survey also reached 500 members of the public, and we think that we serve a population of something in the region of 60,000. Again, that's not a great engagement target. So I guess, Kerry, I'm kind of looking at you, I suppose, in terms of how we further improve engagement. And if people don't feel they're involved, and the very fact that only 1% of the population got involved in this survey might mean we have some work to do.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we are looking at a series of engagement activities to try and increase, obviously, the take up of any consultation engagement exercise we do. So what you're looking at is, and it goes back to the face-to-face element again. What we do find is that going out, having listening engagement sessions, and again involving the public in our decision-making process is always more effective. So that's part of our plan, is to increase forums where we are giving all stakeholders an opportunity to get involved. So that is part of our plan. Obviously, as well as part of the changes in legislation with the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, we have to look at increasing participation across the county borough. So yeah, that work is already in train.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. The last kind of area for me is around sort of the process of reviewing this. I think, Andrew, you mentioned that this is a different process in the first year of having this process in place. I think you might have saying that Audit Wales aren't engaged in physically reviewing this piece of work. It is very much our own self-assessment of work.
Yes, I believe that's the case. I know Ian's on the call today as well from Audit Wales, but previously the annual performance report would have been passed to Audit Wales and a certificate of compliance be given or not to the organisation based on that report. However, that's not the case with the new legislation, albeit Audit Wales will still, I'm sure, use those self-assessment report to inform their work programmes going forward. But it's not done in the same way as previous, where we would be issued with a certificate of compliance.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I guess, Ian, it'd be helpful perhaps to take sort of your views on this. Obviously, I've seen some other organisations, self-assessment firms, and they're equally verbose. I think there is a list of things that need to be included, and I guess sometimes it becomes a scattergun approach, and it's a very, very big document. So I guess there's something on comms about how we do some sort of summary version of that. But Ian, I guess the question for you is, this is the first year of having seen these, and I guess they're not all out yet. What's your take on this versus all the other ones in Wales, if you've had access to those? Are there things we can learn, other things that others are doing better than us, or indeed worse than us?
To be honest, I think it's a bit early to judge this self-assessment against the others, and I'm not cited a lot of them, and they're still being worked through. Andrew's right in his summary of our role. We don't have a statutory role to certify these self-assessments. That role with the previous annual performance reports under the measure, we did have a role to certify them, but we don't. For us, it's more of a key governance document. I think there's a general consensus that this year there'll be a lot of lessons learned in approach. It'll be further refined, but at the moment we're not really in a position to sort of say what good looks like with these self-assessments, to be honest.
Thank you, Ian. I figured that was the case, and that when they're all in, we'll all have the opportunity to review them and see what we can do better. But I think in terms of that communication engagement, I don't know if they're really expecting the average member of the public to sit down and read 185 pages. I think that's a little bit optimistic, I think. So whilst it's a helpful document for us, not sure who else it's helpful for. Okay, my last question really is, there's lots of stuff in here about action plans now, and the kind of the role of this committee. Just so I'd like to perhaps get Andrew, I can come back to you in terms of understanding where the various action plans, there's the annual governance statement, there's all those gaps and actions to be taken and weaknesses identified. How are they going to be marshaled now and reported on and reviewed? Or is that simply a process which gets wrapped up in the next year's, or rather this year's, performance review? Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Even though we will be bringing the action plan back to this committee and council in 12 months' time, I think our governance have moved on to allow us not to leave it for that year. As I said, we'll be building in the action plan into existing governance frameworks across the organisation based on the particular action that will be taken forward. We'll also probably build this in, provided the chairs of scrutiny are happy to do so, into scrutiny forward plans. And the same with this committee chair. If you want regular updates brought forward, I'm sure that could be built into any forward plans, so that it's not only delivered and developed at a local service level and therefore managed through their business improvement plans, feeding up to director meetings, but it's also scrutinised from a senior management point of view in terms of QPIRs, our quarterly performance and improvement reviews, and then ultimately feeding through to Cabinet and Council through scrutiny at this committee and our scrutiny committees.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and yes, I think we should add that to our onto our action log of things we need to have built into the work program of this committee. Thank you. I guess the last question, I don't know whether it's for Ellis or even for Steve, I guess, is there's an awful lot of work in here potentially, and we have to be honest, I think, in terms of what we can deliver in terms of capacity, skills and finances. At the moment, obviously, with the cost of living crisis, and when other papers refer to the settlement agreements that we've got, I'm not sure whether we can afford to do this or whether we can honestly get these done. So I think that's something I think we need to be really careful of to look at. Alice?
I don't know if that's the response one. I mean, from a local authority perspective, obviously we've got to respond to the policy framework that's set out. Obviously, we've set our plans, and our plans are being formulated in terms of corporate plan, in terms of what we think we need to and want to do for the residents of Merthyr Tydfil. Obviously, how far we can go with those plans will be dictated by available finance, and that's obviously yet to be determined. But there's just something come through my computer now. Looks like we're going to have a new Prime Minister very shortly. So we'll see what happens next, I suppose. But yeah, you're right, Chair. Obviously, all this is determined by available finance. Stephen, any additional comment to that?
No, it's just really to add really what Ellis had just said, in that we don't know exactly how much money we are going to get for next year. But obviously you've just read the news, and it is looking very likely that we will be forced with spending cuts into next financial year. So it is a case really then of just assessing what is affordable in going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. That's exactly right. So there's a danger, isn't there, about having a list of things we need to do without it is kind of connected to the government thing, isn't it, about unfunded costs and funded pressures and unfunded pressures, and that honesty about saying there's a list of things we need to do. However, we can't get all of those things done, and so I understand that. I'm sure that both Andrews on my way to on the ball on this, but that's really important, I guess. So we look at action plans, and honestly, those action plans about, so yeah, we can do all these things, and of course sometimes we can't. So that's really helpful. Thank you. I kind of feel like I've exhausted all of the questions I've got for people. I'll look around the room to see if anyone else has got any issues they want to pick up. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Can I just check on next steps? This has already been to one of the scrutiny committees, and it comes here. The next step, I think, is to go to full council.
Yes, Chair, that's right. Yeah. So what we'll do now is we build in the feedback we've had from this committee and our scrutiny committee into the final document. I believe we've already included a lot of what the scrutiny, if not all, into the draft you see in front of you today. What we'll do now is we'll reflect on the comments that we've had back, Chair, particularly around the honesty or realistic, and we'll put something in around that, so that we can mirror then perhaps our ambition against the setting of our MTFP and review of our budgets.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I think that fully concludes this item. I don't know if I'm going to release everyone or not, because I just wonder whether item 5 is connected, and we want to touch that while we have the relevant people present.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the two items that we've been asked to review today is the risk around our performance and the risk around our education attainment. And both of those are really contained within the self-assessment report, particularly the performance aspect. So what you'll see within the report are some of those key areas of mitigation against that risk. When we looked at performance previously, we spoke about whether we had robust scrutiny in terms of officer scrutiny and member scrutiny. We spoke about whether our risks truly reflect what we need to focus on, and whether our mitigation actions were strong enough. So this self-assessment report in itself is one of our mitigation actions to bring forward some of those key challenges for us, some of which, or all of which we've discussed in part today. What I would say, and it links to another item, I think it's item 4 on the agenda, that we're in the process of strengthening our corporate risk register as we speak, based on the approval of the policy strategy which came to this audit committee. I think it was the meeting before last. So with all of that in mind, Chair, what we could summarise is that the production of this document, along with the work we've done strengthening in our governance and our risk management, actually acts to mitigate some of those fears and issues we had around our performance. So that really summarises a quick update, as well as the report which you'll have seen on performance. And perhaps we can go into it in a little bit more detail when we look at item 4. But I think a key aspect of the whole point of doing the self-assessment report is to look at that performance and that performance management. So that was the request to bring it under this item, Chair.
Again, thank you, Andrew. I think it's really helpful. The section in there, but the actions required to manage the risk is really helpful, and it's quite clear what we're trying to do here. The only question I've got on this paper really is, it says under section 4, the performance risk is scored at 20 on our risk register. And then further down it says we want to mitigate these, but there's no hint here as where we think we need to get to. So I kind of say, if we were going to score it in terms of where we'd aim to be, where would we aim to be?
Where we said we're going to look at target risks, inherent risks, and following the work that we've done in publishing our policy improvement strategy. But ultimately, we need to link that back to the work we've done on our risk categories and what we are comfortable accepting as a risk around performance. So I'd refer back to the policy on that, and our target is with our risks to bring it below that 12 score threshold, which we've set out within that policy. However, what I will say again is being realistic. So what we are looking at is we've carried out a workshop with our corporate management team. We've also carried out a workshop with our cabinet. We've looked at applying those risk categorisation statements that we've had now approved, and therefore we look to bring that corporate risk register back to a later governance and audit committee. And if you so wish, Chair, we'd like to carry out a workshop with this committee to take us through the thinking and the application of that new policy across our corporate risk register, so that you have full understanding before it's presented to you in future.
I think you suggested that needs to happen in the next few weeks.
Yes, I did, Chair, so that we can sign off that the updated Q2 corporate risk register then and present that to cabinet for approval, and then we'd resort back to the quarterly updates to this committee following that.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure Democratic Services can take an action to attempt to arrange that in the next whatever deadline we need to have it set by. Yeah, okay. Thank you. The second half of item 5 is a verbal update on school attainment. I don't know whether, Andrew, you're going to lead, or we do have Sue in the room as well. So Sue, do you want to pick up this?
Yeah, okay, if that's all right with Andrew. Yeah. Okay, I think what we're looking at is the last summer what saw the return of the examinations as a mode of assessment. It was a transition year. It included changes to assessment requirements, choosing different grading, and the results were set, and this had been an announcement by Welsh Government, was set broadly midway between the 2019 and the 2021 results. What we haven't had verified data, we'll get that at the end of this term. We are aware, and Andrew has alluded to this earlier on, Chair, that the accountability measures have changed for schools, and we will no longer be using Key Stage 4 attainment as a measure of our performance. We have to look at different aspects, and that's included in the self-assessment report. But what we found this year was that our results were broadly in line. They were actually broadly in line with the 2021 data. Overall, our A strategy were lower than 2019, though, and 2021, but we have had some significant results closer to the Welsh average, which is what our performance target has been, to be as close to the Welsh average as we can. Our literacy point score is now the strongest of the core subjects, which is pleasing for the department, as this is where we have put a lot of focus and a lot of training for this year. We do have continue to work strongly on improving the numeracy scores for the children, both in primary and secondary, and that is something that we are actually looking to work with our school improvement service to actually address. A Welsh second language, members will be aware that we don't have a Welsh secondary school, but we do, all our pupils have the opportunity to take Welsh as a second language in our schools. It is an area of concern for us, as the outcomes did drop this year significantly because for various reasons, and that was the one that hasn't remained the same and actually was closer to 2019 as closely to rather than 2021. So for us, it was a positive outcome in the summer. There's still a lot of work to do, but there's also work to do in actually how we report on school attainment. And if you look at the self-assessment report, which we've just been discussing, it shows a clear, different set of KPIs that we'll be looking at attendance, looking at exclusion figures, looking at our children that are not in education or employment or training, our NEET figures, and the number of children that actually go to the college and take up level 3, so take up for vocational qualifications at an A-level standard, because that actually shows that we are meeting the needs and we're actually pushing the for the economic recovery of Merthyr in the children that are coming out of our schools. I think if there's anything else that members want to know, certainly it's there will be workshops taking place this year for councillors on the new accountability framework, and we will be working with members and officers to understand the changes to the accountability framework from Welsh Government.
Thank you, Sue. That's very comprehensive, and it's a helpful context to understand the sort of the children who've been through the pandemic and are now coming to exam time. And I have first-hand experience that as a daughter who is in year 10, and therefore the exams are looming large. I'm a governor of that school. It's not in this county borough, so it's not a declaration. But one of the questions, of course, is for all schools is the catch-up. The kids who've maybe have been left behind doing online learning. I know that school attendance isn't actually as good as it ever was. It used to be at the target of 95, and I know it's a long way off that. I wonder what extra investment, extra initiatives we've got to actually catch the ones that are maybe falling behind.
Each school will have their own sort of particular needs and will have identified the needs and will have identified particular strategies for looking at that. One of our key foci for this year is actually to ensure that those children, that we have got better attendance in our schools. Last year in particular, the secondary school attendance was way below 90%, the average across the local authority. So we have been fortunate to have an attendance grant from Welsh Government. So we've put initiatives in, and my head of achievement and inclusion has been working with each of the schools to put different strategies in place to encourage those children back. We have reintroduced fixed penalty notices, which haven't gone down well with parents, as you can imagine. But those are back in place to encourage all our children back into school. But we're working with our family liaison officers to develop their understanding of well-being and their understanding of how we can work with the family, working far closer with children's services to see where we can actually get children back into school, and families understanding that they need to be in school to be able to learn to actually close that gap.
That's really helpful, thank you, Sue. I'm acutely aware of we're straying into scrutiny committee territory, but I thought that was really helpful. Thank you. Any other questions for Sue as she is here with us? Okay then. Thank you very much. We and scrutiny committee obviously will keep a close eye on that as it goes forward. Excellent, thank you. That's agenda item 5. We are working backwards up the agenda till we get to, so we'll go to item 4 next, which is the quarterly update on corporate risks. I think, Andrew, we're with you again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so Matthew offers his apologies today, as Matthew usually takes this report. What I thought it was important for us to do is present in.
It was nothing you said, Andrew.
No, it's fine. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the purpose of this report today is to make the Governance and Audit Committee aware of the progress that we've made since the approval of the strategy policy document on risk management. As you'll be aware, there were a number of changes proposed, some of which were discussions we've had at this committee. I know that Bob Williams raised some points, I think it was last year, around some of our risk categorization and how we should perhaps refocus on that, and whether indeed some of our corporate risks were actually risks or whether they were actually caused by some of the other risks within that corporate risk register. Something we also looked at was the fact that, and we alluded to it earlier, actually was around some of our target risks. And therefore, if we had a target risk, perhaps our mitigation actions could be far more targeted. around what we need to do as a local authority to mitigate. And something which we've had, but perhaps we've refocused now, is around some of our tolerances and what aspects are we willing to tolerate, and other aspects which we're not willing to tolerate. So we've worked on applying all of this to our corporate risk register. And as I said earlier, we've worked with our corporate management team in a workshop, and also with our cabinet. I believe it was latter part of last week. So what we propose to do, Chair, is to bring forward our cabinet, our corporate risk register to a workshop to step through each aspect. So you can actually unpick all of that, report that back then to the next Governance and Audit Committee, and propose that for approval in Cabinet, so that we can implement the changes based on the policy approval, and also close off Q2, which would be our half-year report as previous, and then make sure that we have things in place. As well as that, something which Matthew has been keen on putting forward is a summary page around each of our risks, so that you can see it perhaps on a dashboard style, and that could be presented regularly then to the committee. And then if you then so wish that you want to delve into some of those, whether they be mitigation actions or the risk themselves, you've got that basis to have that conversation, to introduce that into the forward plan. So when we have been working on some of our risk descriptions, obviously the world has changed since we approved since we approved it last time. In fact, things are changing so quickly. So, you know, we were in Ellis just mentioned about things changing on a national platform. So I think it is something that myself, Councillor Barry, and Matthew have been working on, is having that regular, not just scoring the risks, but having a regular understanding as to where we are in terms of our mitigation actions, and also in terms of how we can really define those risks so that they're accurate. And that's something which we want to continue going forward. So we may propose to close off some risks which are outdated, but replace them with more relevant risks at this point in time. So that's a quick summary, Chair. And what I plan to do then is bring that corporate risk register to a future meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to give a bit of historical context to it as well. I mean, I think it's safe to say a few years back, Chair, we looked at risk as a tick box exercise. And I keep going back to the meeting we had about 3 years ago, where risk management was on the agenda in a corporate senior management team meeting. And we spent the 2 hours talking about risk, and it all really changed from that point, you know. And we're at a point in a junction now, I think, where the risk register is certainly a work in progress, and we talk about, you know, some of the risk factors in there, and it's difficult to pin down whether, you know, what is the risk? Is the risk climate change, or is the risk engineering for not having climate change in there? It's difficult to really pin down what that is. I think we're at a stage now where I think what we'd appreciate seeing is an all Wales context in terms of generic risk to every council, with sort of a fishbone analysis to take us to a point where these are all the individual aspects that take us to what the risk is of that, and how to manage it, and how to mitigate the various elements of it. So and we've also got to a juncture where you note now that senior managers are in their everyday language talking about the risk. So you can see us beginning to embed within what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we've taken leaps and bounds in terms of where we are with that. And I think it'll continue to morph and change until we come down to a more exact sort of risk register. I think we're going to bring a paper that will go on, perhaps we'll come through this committee, and I think we need to bring a paper which suggests to Welsh Government that we're all on the same page in terms of what risk is, because you see so many different versions of it with different authorities. I think we need that constant, that measure, you know, from an all Wales perspective, not just so that each authority can measure where they are with risk, but so that national government and regional government have got an idea of where we are with risk in terms of, I mean, today, case in point, with, you know, the continually changing political and economic climate, it would be useful to have a measure which you can gauge right down to those generic forms within each authority, which give an indication of where we measure and how we mitigate against that risk. I think that'll be a useful direction to take. So we're working on that at the moment. We'll have more meetings and we'll bring it back to this committee in future, if that's okay, Chair.
That's really, really helpful. Andrew, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, so something which we done as part of this review and part of the strategy review was I'm not going to take the credit for the team done this, where they brought all risk registers from across Wales and they done an analysis and benchmarking exercise, which was put forward by our SWAP team who done a piece of work with us on auditing our risks. And something we're also working on with all other local authorities is be part of the All Wales Risk Network. And going back to what Councillor Barry said, we could actually have those discussions in that network and then use that intelligence to inform our risk registers going forward.
That's a really good, innovative piece of work. I think if I'd have thought of it, I'd recommend you do it as well. I think that's really helpful. The one question, I guess, about that sort of it becoming more commonplace, and you hear people talking about risks in the corridors, which is great, or back when we used to be in corridors. One of the things that's really important is we have a common language to describe these things. So one person says, you know, big or significant or something, that means the same as somebody else saying it. And particularly when you're trying to compare them across other organizations, we don't understand necessarily the detailed context of that. So how do we, are we working on a kind of, this is not just about training, I guess, but it's just about having that lexicon of understanding what we mean by significant, because it's awful easy for a service manager to say, it's the most important thing in the world. But for the organization whole, it most certainly isn't. So, Andrew.
Yes, Chair, is the answer. We've got our guidance and that fits in line with the work that we've been doing in approving our policy strategy document. But in addition to that, Matthew meets with each head of service, both to look at the operational risk registers twice a year at least. Also, in addition to that, at strategic or service management board meetings, so that point of challenge can come through. In addition, when we bring the corporate risk register, whether it be through escalation or through risks that are already on that register, to our corporate management team, we have that overarching view then as to, well, that might be a high risk within Department A, but that's the lowest risk in Department B. So what we do then is we apply or make sure that the guidance has been applied to that. So we do have consistency then when we measure our risks. So that includes officer challenge, it includes service management level challenge, and then also at a corporate level through the workshops with the cabinet and the corporate management team before then they're actually brought to this committee for challenge and through to cabinet for approval, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really helpful. I think if I can summarize, I thought this is a really strong paper that should give the committee lots of assurance. I kind of turn the page and say, where's the register? But you fully explain where we are in terms of doing that. We've talked about a workshop to get that work together. So barring any other comments, I'm happy to take that paper as it says to note. And just by way of good governance, and I should have done this as we went through it, item 5 technically was to note, so we do note that. Item 6, however, wasn't to note. It was, therefore we need to go back and just check that. It said the recommendation on item 6 said the Governance Audit Committee note and debate the content of the report. I think we did that. And recommended progress to Council of Approval. And I guess we are happy for it to be recommended to be progressed. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Just for good governance to make sure that happens, and apologies. I'm glad somebody kicked me under the table to remind me. Thank you. We will now progress to item 7, which is Audit Wales report on audit and risk. Which I think all these papers are kind of connected today, aren't they? So, Ian, are you going to be leading on this one?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, the report is a summary of some key parts of the assurance and risk assessment work we did for the 21-22 audit year. We do assurance and risk assessment work across all councils in Wales, so all councils will be getting a similar report to this one. This report focuses on 3 areas: financial position, the implications of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, and the council's carbon reduction plans. With regard to the financial position work, it's worth noting that we concluded this work in July this year. Obviously, a lot's happened in recent months, and councils are facing increasing financial pressures, as was discussed earlier. But this was our view of the point at this particular point in time. The main message is the council's immediate financial position has improved with increased levels of reserves, but the council still needs to identify how it's going to address the budget gap over the medium term. We note that, aided by increases in revenue funding from the Welsh Government, the council has achieved a surplus in the past 3 years. In the last 2 financial years, the council's usable reserves have increased significantly. The council has achieved the majority of its planned savings in the last 2 years, and has set an efficiencies target of 6.4 million between this financial year and 2024-25. But even if those efficiency targets are reached, there's still a significant deficit of 10.3 million up to 24-25. We know the council is beginning to take steps to determine the extent to which its recovery, transformation, and improvement plan can help to address its financial deficit over the course of its medium-term financial plan, and we think it's vital the council progresses that. And the report also draws people's attention to a financial sustainability data tool that's available on our website that includes a range of local government comparative financial data. We also took a high-level look at the arrangements the council's put in place to respond to the Local Government Elections Act 2021. The report touches on some of the key additional duties that Act brought in and how the council has taken forward its arrangements in this regard. And then the final section of the report is on the council's carbon reduction plans. We did local work at all 22 councils that was complementary to our July 2022 national report that we published on the public sector's readiness for net zero by 2030. Our main finding was the council has not finalised its net zero delivery plan and needs to put in place proper governance arrangements to ensure it is in a position to meet the challenge of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030. The council has identified some significant barriers to achieving the 2030 target, such as capacity, expertise, and finance. Our report notes that despite those barriers, the decarbonisation risk is not yet reflected in the council's corporate risk register, although I note that's likely to change in the near future, as mentioned in the report for the earlier corporate risks item. And we made one recommendation as a result of this work. I think all councils in Wales have been given the same or very similar recommendation. That's in order to meet its net zero ambition, the council needs to fully cost its action plan and ensure that it's aligned with its medium-term financial plan. So that's an overview of the assurance and risk assessment report, but I'd be happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful, and your introductory remarks echo exactly what I thought when I read this paper. It's impossible to write financial information and it stay current for more than the length of time.
That's right, yeah.
Pretty much.
Exactly.
So the world has moved on significantly from that. Decarbonisation is clearly in here, and Andrew's already mentioned how that's going to be added in the risk register. The recommendation is the same as the recommendation, as you said, for all local authorities, but nevertheless, we'll have to look at what the council's response to that is. Is anyone in a position to sort of give a response to what we're doing about developing the zero carbon action plan and a fully costed plan at that? Andrew.
I can give a very quick update, but I certainly won't be able to give a full update, Chair. I know that one of the key aspects was the appointment of a new post, carbon management officer or manager, I believe the post is, within the organisation. That was approved and has gone out to advert, and I believe is now closed. So we are looking to appoint a key member of staff to develop and drive forward that agenda, Chair.
Thank you, and I note, because it's a bit of a large in here, ensuring it's fully costed. So I guess there's a conversation, Steve, to be had around, again, ambition versus reality here. And whilst we may have a small war chest, that war chest is not going to last for very long, is it? Right, Mark, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, it is a piece of work in the internal audit plan to look at this aspect, but that's exactly what we were made aware of. The authority's looking to recruit a relevant manager to take this forward, so we've deferred that now and to look at it in March just to see where the authorities hopefully got to by then, assuming some progress has been made in recruiting by that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the financial one, as you say, is probably different picture again this afternoon. Now we got Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, but the decarbonisation is an interesting one for me in terms of we do have those measures, you know, as all authorities do in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. The issue I've got with it is we don't know what the journey looks like. The public don't know what the journey looks like. They don't know what decarbonisation means to within this authority, and hence they don't know when we achieve something in terms of decarbonisation, how that contributes to that journey and to that end destination. And one of the things that I've tasked the team with is to explain that overall journey to 2030. What does it look like? What contributes to it? And to what extent do all these measures contribute to it? That's the one issue. The other issue on financial management of it is we're told that decarbonisation has financial savings within it, and it's not good enough for me now to hear that. We need to realise what are those financial savings. Can we write that into our medium-term financial plan, and to what extent can we have a surety that those savings will actually be made? So I think from a financial perspective, we've got a little way to go in terms of tying down what financial savings can be made, and from the public's perception, we need to tell the public that journey and explain where we are on that journey. So we've got a little way to go there, but we're working on all aspects of that at the moment, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. That's absolutely right. That's really important, and I guess the public needs to understand its role in this as well. I know it feels somewhat piecemeal at the moment, but I guess for the council, the cost of decarbonisation up front, there may well be savings in the future, but to buy a fleet of electric vehicles, bin lorries, etc., is going to cost some money. To put solar panels on the roof of this building and other municipal buildings is going to cost money. So they may well pay back over time, but you need to have that money up front. And I suspect our capital budget is somewhat stretched. I suspect. So yeah, so understanding that fully costed thing is really helpful about upfront versus long-term savings, and making sure we map those through. Anybody else want to add anything to that? I think that's a helpful conversation. That is just to receive. So thank you, Ian, for that paper and the conversation that it sparked. Just one final thought for me is, where does decarbonisation sit in the scrutiny pantheon of the council? Is this committee as an overview committee? Because it cuts across everything that they do. Is there a joint scrutiny committee that covers everything?
Yeah, so it ultimately would fit in with that scrutiny, corporate services and resources, which contains the chairs for all scrutiny committees, as well as independent chair and vice chair, and Councillor Gibbs is the vice chair of that committee. So ultimately, in terms of this report and what we're speaking about today, that would fit into our agenda. However, as you say, Chair, you're quite right. It does cut across a lot of what the organisation does. So no doubt, for example, the one you raise around fleet, that could well go to the neighbourhood services scrutiny committee. Something we have changed in terms of our governance is how we actually scrutinise things 3 or 4 times. We may look, or we do actually look at our forward plan, and if there are items which cut across a number of committees, we would run then either a joint committee or a joint workshop, feedback to the relevant committees, depending upon what angle they are approaching the topic on, Chair.
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you. That's really, really helpful to understand that process. So we received the report of Audit Wales. Ian, thank you for that.
Thanks.
We'll move now on to item 8, which is internal audit progress report. I look past Mark towards Lisa, who's going to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item number 8 is progress against the internal audit plan. And the purpose of this report is to provide members of the committee with a position statement on progress made against the internal audit plan 22-23. So the internal audit plan was submitted to Governance and Audit Committee for consideration and approval on the 18th of July this year, and the plan outlined the audit assignments to be carried out during the year. So the current situation is that as at the 12th of October 2022, we had completed 10 final reports or completed assignments. There were 2 draft reports issued, 1 piece of work awaiting manager review. We had 6 pieces of work in progress and a further 7 pieces of work that were being scoped. At Appendix A, there is the status of each planned review for the year, the audit opinion and the number of recommendations made where we've issued a final report. What members will see is that of the 10 audit assignments where they have been completed, only 5 of these led to an internal audit opinion at the end. This is because the nature of some of these pieces of work, although we plan for them in the report, they don't lead to an audit opinion. For example, the head of audit annual report and internal audit planning. So of the 5 pieces of work, final reports that we have issued where we've given an audit opinion, there has been 1 audit opinion of substantial assurance, 3 of reasonable assurance and 1 of no assurance. So in respect of the 1 piece of work where we give an opinion of no assurance, this was in respect of waste services income collection. This was quite a unique piece of work because initially it came to our attention as a result of a phone call. So management had asked us to go in and undertake a piece of audit work as a result of a potential missing money. So the objective of this audit was to review the arrangements in place for the collection, recording, banking and retention of income received in respect of waste services replacement bins and look at the controls in place. So we undertook this audit and basically we identified an overall lack of internal control and a series of key weaknesses which had contributed to the missing money, but it was not possible to determine any specific reason or any individual responsible. Hence, we give the no assurance audit opinion. There were 8 high priority recommendations made. All of these were agreed by management and progress against these is being monitored in accordance with the plan, with the internal audit monitoring procedures. And we'll also include this area as a follow-up audit for next year. So I've bullet pointed there the key issues that we noted in respect of this audit review. Looking at the lack of procedures, there was a lack of management control, there wasn't any restricted access to the main office, the records held on the system did not correspond with the number of receipts issued, there was issues around control stationery, lack of agreements in place with contractors, CCTV issues, and we at the end of the conclusion of the audit, we were impossible to give an exact amount of missing money, but it ranged between 2,156 and 2,261. For reference in this report, we've given a list of the audit assurance category codes just for members to refer to. And in respect of the final reports that we've issued to date this year, we've made 20 audit recommendations to improve control, governance and risk management arrangements. Again, for reference, we've also given the recommendation categories within this report. So they're either high priority, medium priority or a low priority. So I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on the progress against the internal audit plan.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a helpful summary. And I guess the first question is in terms of progress. You mentioned 10 have been complete, but 5 of those are other pieces of work here. So 5 audits which come to an opinion have been completed, and there's 40 odd left to be done. At this stage, should the audit committee be worried about progress?
I don't think so. I think it's key to mention that the audit plan for this year was brought to members on the 18th of July. So that is, although we're halfway into the year, July was over a quarter into the year, and also the summer period is also a period when we get a bit of a lull, not only in respect of auditors taking leave, but our auditees are also on leave. So I think this is a position statement that we often find ourselves in this time of year. But as leave has taken now, this is the time when over the next 6 months we start to turn around audit assignments. So I think, you know, we're happy that we're going to have enough coverage by the end of the year to give an opinion across the council's financial systems and procedures.
Thank you. Full set of audit shoulders at the wheel. Thank you. The obvious other question from me is regarding that limited assurance report. It is concerning that it's not even a limited assurance report, it's a no assurance report, which is the worst category you can have. And the 8 high level recommendations that were made. Would it be possible for the committee to receive a copy of that report? And then once we've had the chance to consider it, we may or may not decide to take further action, do some further investigations. But we note that you've already mentioned a follow-up piece of work, so perhaps we may wait until we see that. But if we can see the report, it would be really helpful. Thank you. Any other questions for Lisa on this? Sue.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask in terms of the amount of money that went missing on page 225 of the papers. Am I right in saying that amount, the money was never recovered, as far as you're aware?
Lisa.
Thanks, Sue. No, it wasn't possible because we couldn't determine the exact specific reason, or there was no one individual responsible. It was a combination of an overall lack of control, lack of procedures, lack of restricted access, lack of CCTV. As a result of there being no definitive reason, the money was and is missing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And is therefore written off as a loss to the council. Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Another helpful report to understand the progress we're going down. And speaking of progress, if we move to, sorry, we note that report. Make sure I say that. I'm sorry. It is about half a mile away from me, so thankfully others have spotted me. Thank you, Councillor Gibbs. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really astounded on this aspect of the report, to be honest, with the waste services. No, and I'm glad you guys have come in and found, not really found, but found out that there appears to be no controls in place from what I can glean from that. So this roughly £2,200 that is missing, is that just out of this year, or is that from when this started? Has this been ongoing? Is this a regular occurrence?
Lisa or Helen's going to come in.
Your microphone's not on, Helen. I can't hear you.
Try a different microphone. Hold on a second. Where we just reorganize ourselves.
No problem.
Sorry about that. It was on. You can usually hear me without a microphone.
Not this far away, Helen.
So I did the piece of work and I went back to records from 2019, April 2019. So that was I think the majority of the money went missing. I think it was 2020, 2021. But because the records were, and were poor for the years either side, I couldn't determine that was the exact amount of money that had gone missing.
Right. Okay. I think basically I just wanted to understand whether it was accumulation from a number of years, or whether it was isolation for 1 year, which means it could have potentially happened in previous years.
Go on, Mark, you want to add to that?
Yeah, as I understand it, and Helen will correct me if I'm wrong, but this came about as a result of COVID. Processes had to change as a result of COVID, and I think this was something was put in as an interim arrangement without maybe setting things up on looking as if it was going to take place over a longer period of time. So what was seen to be something very temporary ended up taking place for quite some time. So I think that was a contributory factor. So everything that's in the report is correct, but I think it'd be, it's giving you a wider picture then, or a more complete picture, because this came about as a result of COVID. So things having to be set up quite quickly, and maybe they're not, hang on, this is now going on more than a couple of months. We need to firm up the arrangements and make sure that they are appropriate. So that's part of the context.
Yeah, so you're quite comfortable that the arrangements that have been proposed are going to be taken forward and adhered to. We haven't got anybody saying we don't agree with it at any point.
No, that's right. So out of the 8 high recommendations that I made, all had been accepted. 7 of those have already been implemented, with 1 outstanding, which is it's got a revised implementation date of the 31st of October, so we're only a week away. But that needed a little bit more time to set up with regards to the storage of the bins. But yeah, management accepted all the recommendations.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you for picking it up, and I'm glad something's has been sorted. So thank you both. Thanks, Chair.
And I don't know, finally, Helen, whether you've got any context, because obviously we're talking about a loss of £2,000 and something. Do you have an idea of the size of the income we get from the service in a year, just to put it into some sort of context?
I don't, sorry, no. Over the 3 years, the processes had changed, so it wasn't able to compare each year, or as it was previously, because the change due to COVID was the kiosks were closed in the reception area. So whereas they would take the bank in or any collections they made straight to the reception area into the kiosks, they were taking them back to the office and storing them into an unlocked or broken drawer. So we couldn't pinpoint exactly where the money or where the weakness was that caused the result in the missing money, but there was a lot of controls that were weak that would have contributed to the money going missing.
Thank you, Helen. That's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, we note that report. There's no further actions, and we will go on to item 9. Well, our auditors reshuffle themselves to get in front of a microphone that works. Item 9 is the internal audit recommendations. And I just set this one up just by saying what a good place we appear to be in. The vast majority of the recommendations are either not due or have been done. With that said, teeing up, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. So this report at agenda item 9 provides members of the committee with a position statement on internal audit recommendations made, implemented and outstanding. So recommendations are made at the conclusion of an audit review if it is felt that improvements should be made to mitigate risk, strengthen controls. Recommendations are included in our final audit reports, and recipients are asked to provide management responses to indicate whether they agree with the recommendation and how they plan to implement them. And these recommendations are categorised as high, medium or low priority, and we ask for target dates to give us an indication of by when management plan to put these recommendations into place, and we monitor these recommendations using our audit software called Pentana MK. So our recommendation categorisation, they're either categorised as a high priority, a medium priority or a low priority. Once the target date that managers have provided us have expired, we contact them and ask for feedback on the status of each agreed recommendation. And our audit software allows us to monitor the status of these recommendations on a month-to-month basis. Any audits that we conclude with a no assurance or limited assurance audit opinion are also subject to a follow-up review. Now, at Appendix A is a position statement on the internal audit recommendations made, implemented and outstanding. So this is a position statement as at the 12th of October, and this is the first time that we have brought this report to the committee. Moving forward, we suggest that it would only be the outstanding recommendations from the previous year included together with the current financial year. So at the moment, this is a position statement on everything for the past 2 years. So we've got all the recommendations relating to the reviews for 21-22 and 22-23. So members will note that a total of 118 recommendations were made to improve the control environment during 21-22. And for the current financial year, 20 recommendations have been made. There have been 9 recommendations which haven't been accepted by service areas, either due to management reporting the controls are already sufficient or an alternative solution was suggested by the manager. As of the 12th of October, 84 recommendations made last year had been implemented. 1 has passed its implementation date and is outstanding, and 24 have target dates in the future. I think it's also important to mention that whilst we have 1 low priority recommendation outstanding, we have received verbal confirmation that that has been implemented, but we're just awaiting some written confirmation to update the status. And for the recommendations made in the current financial year, 11 have been implemented and 9 have a target date in the future, and none have been disagreed. So the purpose really of this report, as well as to provide members with information on the position statement, is also to get some feedback in respect to the format of the report. And this is a report that we are also presenting to the 3 other governance and audit committees in the shared service. And once feedback is obtained from all governance and audit committees, then we can go back to our software suppliers and commission a report that we can just click a button and the report is there. So we'll also look into some kind of feedback that members are happy with the kind of format and information that that is being presented. And I'm happy to take any questions on the report if members have any.
Thank you, Lisa. First impression is it's a very helpful table. It tells you exactly where you are in terms of recommendations, not agreed, implemented, still outstanding, and future date. I think that's really, really helpful. A couple of things for me. I think one thing you said was we only included this year and last year. I think as an audit committee, we'd like to know about all outstanding recommendations, and particularly as they slide more into the past, it almost feels like if I hold it long enough, everyone will forget about it. Well, that's not how I work anyway, and hopefully that's not how this committee works. So there needs to be a way of making sure we do track some of those, and some of them may take 2 or 3 years. They might set future dates that are a long way in the future, but that's fine. And we need to make sure we keep an eye on those. So that's one bit of feedback I would give. And the other one is around the not agreed ones. You noted that there was a report there where there were 9 recommendations, and which weren't agreed. Now, I don't want to open the door to looking back into 2021 or 21-22 audits. What I'd suggest is any going forward where there are any fundamental disagreements, that we can have a summary of that here at this committee, because in theory disagreements should be resolved by there's a factual misunderstanding, and any wash-up meetings could agree that or the author was wrong and they didn't understand all this, or the client didn't understand, and we'll get to a formal words where we agree where it needs to be. So disagreed is a pretty rare thing, I would suggest. So I think that perhaps if you could just do that, flagging that up in terms of going forward. I notice there aren't any for this year, so we're in a good place. Yeah, I think, as I said, I think in terms of the format is one thing, and what this report is telling us, is a very, really, really positive position. In other words, that there are outstanding actions for those who are always scheduled to be in the future, and in due course they may or may not become outstanding, or they may be implemented. But as it stands, very positive. Comments, questions for anyone? I think I take it as a really good sign, and I think a couple of feedbacks there. The layout I think is really helpful. I just say future. How many years you include without it being becoming overcluttered, that's something to think about, and something about not recommended, not agreed recommendations. Okay, good. We note. Thank you much. We're on the home straight now, folks. Agenda item 10 is the forwards work program for this committee. Helen's got your name alongside, but I don't know who's going to pick this up.
Oh, I'll pick it up.
What, Mark?
Give Helen a rest.
She's nowhere near a microphone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And obviously members are used to receiving this report now. It's the same format for every meeting, so members can see what's planned to come to the next meeting and future meetings. So you can see there on the table at 4.2 what's planned to come to the next meeting on the 28th of November. The final statement of accounts, including the final annual governance statement, for example, trying to think what else was there, and the Audit Wales audit of accounts items, they may be delayed due to some national issues going on. Steve, I don't know, Helen, whether you wanted to add anything about that.
Shall we segue to Steve to talk about where we are with final accounts?
Yeah, if I could add there, is that at this point in time, and this includes for just every authority in Wales, that the accounts can't be signed off at this point in time because we have an issue with assets, and it's how the actual infrastructure assets are shown on the balance sheet as part of historic cost. So both Audit Wales and SIPA have just raised some concerns as to how that should be shown. That's open at this present time, and hopefully it should be resolved over the next couple of weeks or so. And so we hope for that the accounts then can be signed off within the next month. But it is subject to us getting some kind of agreement on how these assets treated for last year. So that's where we currently are with it, but it does affect every authority in Wales. So it's not only us, it's every single authority. So hopefully that this just will be resolved very shortly.
Steve, do you want to quickly summarise why this year as opposed to any other year, where we've obviously had roughly the same assets in previous years, and in previous years we valued them to an acceptable standard to all concerned. What's happened this year that makes everything so different?
I think it's the case that it's been rumbling, I think, for a number of years. That is my understanding. It's been rumbling for a number of years, but it's basically it's now come to a head. And again, I think there was an understanding that potentially that this wouldn't be an issue until the accounts for the current financial year. But it is something which has been put off for just a couple of years, I think. But it just comes to this head now. So I can't really give you any more than that at this point in time, without going into very technical matters, which I don't want to go into at this point in time.
No, I don't want you to either. So
I think I'd better stop there, Chair. I think in case I go a little bit too far into it. I think.
Thanks, Steve. That's really helpful. Well, so just while we're talking about that, then, as is currently scheduled to come into the November meeting, I think when that does come, something that needs to come either from Audit Wales or from yourself, just to explain why we are where we are, because obviously timetables have been thrown out of the window rather here. Just to check one last thing on that one, statutory deadlines and stuff, and are we in danger of breaching anything? And whilst I recognise that every authority may well be in the same boat, I still don't want the headline says all councils, including Merthyr, failed to meet deadline.
Yes, it's certainly that is the risk. But as we currently stand, we've got till the end of November for the accounts to be signed off. So we've still got a month. But and I think as well that if it does extend beyond that, then I think there just will be an extension.
Okay.
For the accounts as well.
So the timetable, dance, is that audit committee is currently scheduled for the 28th of November. Does that mean that councils can happen on the 29th or 30th to agree the accounts? And
well, yes, I think it's the case that we will have to call a special and for the accounts then to be approved by just by the end of next month. Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We digressed from the forward work plan. Mark, is there anything else you want to add to the plan? Thanks. I think a couple of things we've got to, as well as Andrew Mogford suggested, and we have a session on risk. Noting some comments from, I think it was Councillor Davis last time, was around training for members. We probably need to find a slot for some informal training for the committee. I don't know when that needs to be, but we need to find a slot for that. Making sure we make sure that everything on that action log is included in the forward look, and I think you've already done that, Mark. The last thing is a personal plea. The 20th of November is currently the next meeting, which is scheduled for 2 p.m. If we could move that to the morning, I would be very, very appreciative, because I can't make 2 p.m. So I don't know whether I look around and see nods and otherwise, or should I just leave that with Democratic Services to have a think about? I think we'll leave it to Democratic Services to think about. Okay, thank you. Last item then, reflection and evaluation. Not a lot of reflection and evaluation. It's great to have a large number of people in the room. It makes life a lot easier. Nice to have a visitation from the chief executive and the senior management team. I think that means that the committee has been taken seriously, and I think the committee is going into its work as well. One thing I'm wondering about, one of the things that came out of, there was an all Wales chairs of audit committees, local authority audit committees a couple of weeks ago, which I attended a little bit of. One of the reflections was there about sort of joined up working within the organisation, and perhaps I'll take it offline, but I'll have a conversation that I know this happens in other places where the chair of the audit committee is involved in the joint scrutiny committee. And I think that would help. Again, this committee will have connection. I recognise that Councillor Gibbs is already a part member of that. That might be something to think about as we go forward. And for me, I think those training is going to be helpful as well to make sure we as lay members get under the skin of the organisation a little more. Okay. Under item 12, any other business? I had an update on the accounts, but we've covered that off rather. So for me, I don't have anything else. Does anyone else have any other business they wish to raise? Okay, the next meeting, as I said, is scheduled for Monday, 28th of November. Excellent, everyone. Thanks, Bill, for bearing, and we'll try to do better next time. Thanks.
Thanks.